If you're over 35 and you're still trying to train like you're 22, you're working on borrowed time. And injuries start to pile up, results start to slow down, and at the end of the day, you're going to start getting a little frustrated. The truth is that you just need a smarter plan moving forward. And today I'm going to be breaking down the 10 non-negotiables if you want to stay lean, strong, and pain-free into your late 30s, 40s, and beyond. And these are hard rules here, and the ones that separate themselves by doing things that are more sustainable are going to win long term, and the other group are simply just going to burn out. And before we get into it, though, real quick, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. The only way this podcast grows is through you. So thank you so much for listening. And if you ever got value from any of our podcasts, it really would mean the world to me if you shared this with a friend or took a second to leave a review, not just for me, but because it might give someone else the knowledge or the motivation they need to dial in their fitness journey. Really appreciate your support, and let's get right into it. So why fitness over 35 matters. So hormones, recovery, wear and tear, we're going to get into all of that. So all those things are going to start to accumulate into your mid-30s to late 30s and then beyond. So you have to make sure that the training plans align. And this isn't about lowering the bar. It's just simply about adjusting the strategy in order to keep making progress. And you have to take a step back and define your mission. So we spend our 20s probably training or maybe even being an athlete, and our recovery is better. You could go out, you could party all night long and then wake up and then be completely fine. But things change over time. And our goal here now is to train for life, not just for PRs. So our training style has to accommodate that. And so some definitions that we're going to clarify really early on before we get right into the 10 commandments is, first off, smart intensity, which is training hard without frying your CNS or your joints. And then we're going to go into progressive overload, which is systematically increasing stress for gains. Cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and that wrecks muscle and recovery when unmanaged. Mobility versus flexibility. Now, this is a big one because mobility is control through range of motion. Flexibility is simply just range in a static position. And consistency versus intensity. So frequency and repeatability is more important than other extremes. So it's more important to be doing something every day rather than just be working out once or twice a week. It's just not as effective. So let's go into number 1. So thou shalt not train like you're 22. I did a little short video on this, but I really liked it a lot and I got a lot of good feedback from it. So we're making an entire podcast on it. So first one's my favorite. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I made, especially when I kind of hit 35 plus. And, I'm only 37, so I'm only 2 years old over the 35, but I definitely did start feeling some stuff at 35. And then now my training's a little bit smarter, and I actually feel a lot better now. I've kind of changed up my training. And so first off, we have to look at what high risk is and low reward for reckless intensity. So you're not going to recover as well. You haven't accumulated all the repetitive stress, and you haven't had normal wear and tear from just doing the same repetitive movements over and over again. So that's why it's so important to have variety in your training. So you have to identify what is low reward or reckless intensity, and then just simply X that out. And you have to replace the word go hard with go smart. Okay, so you could still be intense without being at 100% effort. And that's the big thing that people get mixed up, especially when it comes to CrossFitters or CrossFit in general, is people think that intensity literally means 100% effort, which it just means high intensity. And intensity is relative per the individual or per how you're feeling that day or per what you are actually training for or what the stimulus is. Because if you went 100% effort on a 20-minute AMRAP, the first minute or 2 minutes, you're going to die. So there is some sort of different levels of intensity based on the workout itself. Another one is really good to use if not like you're training like you're 22 anymore, is use RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion. And so this is using deloads. This is using better warm-ups. And also having, just like with lifts, having percentages of effort. Okay, so there's a lot of times where 80% effort is going to be more sustainable than 100% effort. And you want to avoid chasing personal records weekly and try not to max out every time we're doing a heavy lift. I mean, you should still go heavy. It should still be uncomfortable. You should still be making funny faces. It shouldn't be easy, but that doesn't mean you have to max out every time. There's a time and a place for that, and there's a time and place for heavy singles, and there's a time and place for being sustainable across the board. And you want to build instead of testing constantly. Let's go into number 2, which is thou shalt prioritize recovery as much as training. So recovery is where adaptation happens. So contrary to popular belief that when you train or when you exercise or you work out, whichever comes first, that you're actually adding stress to yourself, you're breaking your body down. And then what happens is when your body regenerates during the rest period, that's actually when it gets fitter, because you're essentially telling your body like, oh my goodness, I am not adequate to sustain whatever the demands are of my external environment. So therefore I have to adapt to it. Okay. So that's a really important point that you need to know, is that recovery is where adaptation happens. So if there's anything else you take away from this podcast, remember that one. Sleep equals growth hormone plus testosterone plus repair. Now, as you get older, you probably have kids, you have a stressful job. It's a lot harder to sleep. And when you do get a little bit of downtime, you tend to stay up a little bit later, you tend to scroll. And I know because I do the same thing at times, and I know you struggle with the same thing. So you have to prioritize sleep, 7 to 9 hours. Do what you can, figure it out, change your lifestyle up however you need to, and get as much sleep as you can. Your body will thank you later on in life. And then mobility equals joint insurance. Now remember, mobility is through range of motion, and we want to make sure that our mobility is good, because once we tighten up, especially us men, for some reason, that at least from what I've seen in my training, is that you just tend to, it's a lot harder and a lot longer process to get mobile again. And I kind of neglected stretching for like a good year, and I paid dearly for it. And it's not fun playing catch up. So just a little bit here and there, it could be as little as 5 minutes a day, is going to end up making a big difference in the long run. And then finally, you want to schedule recovery sessions with the same respect as workouts. Okay, so this means like zone 2 work, recovery work, and really you should be doing some sort of recovery work anytime you're not actually doing training, whether it's a walk or just playing a sport outside. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or anything formal in the gym. It just needs to be something that you can actually do, and for about an hour or so nonstop at a very easy pace. And that's going to add in extra activity on the days that you aren't training, which is going to burn more calories, going to help you stay lean. And it's also going to increase blood flow and help with your recovery. To move on to number 3, which is thou shalt lift heavy and often. So muscle mass is the number one predictor of metabolic health and independence later in life. So as you age, it's a lot harder to put on muscle mass. Your hormones are different. You don't produce as much testosterone, which is an anabolic hormone. And what happens is that if you do lose muscle or you atrophy, and if the good old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it, it's very true, especially when it comes to muscle. And then you're more likely to have injuries, because tendons and ligaments aren't challenged. And we want as much muscle mass as possible, especially as we age. And it's just going to keep us safer from falls, etc., and keep us strong to where we can get on and off the toilet ourselves. And we want to focus on compound lifts, so squats, deadlifts, presses, and pulls. Now, again, this is completely optional, but you do want to use as many compound lifts as you can within reason. And you just don't want to overdo it. But the compound lifts are gonna same thing, impact your hormone levels. It's gonna give you the most bang for your buck, essentially. And then heavy equals relative to you, and that's not maxing out, but it's challenging. Now we kind of already touched on this, but it should, when you lift, it should be heavy. Like, you're really not getting any benefits from lifting light unless you're doing mechanical work, technique work, or you're using it as a way to prep the body for a warm up, or if you're overcoming an injury and you're rehabbing that injury. But it should be a challenging sets, at least 1 to 3 challenging sets per training session, if not being sustainable across the board. And then you want to train legs often. These are hormone drivers. Now, this is something I've actually experienced myself that I could share with you, is that, so I kind of tweaked both my knees, and I kind of took the last 2 years off, like late 2023 all the way up to 2025. Kind of easy on the legs. Now I still train them, but I couldn't really squat super heavy. And so I definitely felt not myself for those times. And I love squats. So, and I love training legs. So it's my favorite. Back squat's probably my favorite exercise. So that's something that is definitely that is true there, because it's such a large muscle group that it secretes. It's great for boosting testosterone, especially heavy squats for high rep squats. Like, one of my favorite ways to boost natural test production is to do a 20 rep max back squat, even though it sucks, but we do it every year at the gym. And it actually does work wonders for driving hormones. Number 4 is thou shalt fuel, not starve. So under eating will lead to tight metabolism, low libido, and stalled progress. So if you want to lean out, you should be eating in a calorie deficit. But the problem is a lot of times people eat when way too far of a deficit, or they're not eating enough. It's very rarely in between. And usually we're shooting for like a 500 calorie deficit. If you want to do a sustainable cut, that'll have you lose about a pound a week if you're about 500 calories under. And the only way to know is to track. Okay. If you're not tracking, you're just guessing and it's not going to work. And with the problem is also if you undereat too much is that is going to slow your metabolism down. So you can't undereat either because, and then I've seen this happen all the time is people are like, well, I barely eat and I'm not losing anything. I'm like, well, the problem is also is that your metabolism is slowing down because you're not eating and you're also not training as hard as you think you are. So, and you also need to prioritize protein. So 1 pound of, or 1 gram per pound of body weight. We talked about this before. You can keep your carbs right around training, and then fats for hormone production. I like to eat fats more in the morning because it gives me sustainable energy throughout the day. And you want to eat for performance, not restriction. So you want to eat that will fuel your workouts. You don't want to just constantly be cutting and eating only salads because you're also not going to have the energy to produce an intense enough workout or have the energy to do any heavy lifts. So it's really important that you do fuel for this. And you want to track or build structured habits. So protein before noon, one of my golden rules that I tell all my members is that, or anyone I work with, is that your goal here is to eat half your body weight in grams of protein before noon, because catching up on it later in the day is very difficult to do, especially because protein is so satiating, means it keeps you full longer. It's going to be very difficult to get all that in when it's later in the day. And carbs post-workout, so I like a 2-to-1 carb to protein ratio. So if I set my body weight, I typically consume anywhere between 50 and 60 grams of carbs post-workout within about 30 minutes and about 30 grams of protein post-workout, all in a liquid form because it's easy for me to get down and it gets in my system as fast as possible. And also my insulin is spiked post-workout as well, so I'm taking advantage of that window. Let's move on to number 5, which is thou shalt stretch what's tight and strengthen what is weak. So tight hips, shoulders, and ankles, these are common culprits, especially in myself. And so, and the problem is if you're not consistent with this, it gets very difficult to release. And sometimes that could actually lead to more problems down the road, especially in the joints. Like, so for example, with my knee example in the squat section, when I was talking about how I couldn't really do much legs, all I did was simply really start stretching out my hip flexors. I didn't realize how tight they were. Like, they were so tight. It was embarrassing. And it took me a solid 2 to 4 weeks to actually get them opened up again to where they were okay. They weren't good, but they were better. And then that actually solved a lot of my knee problems because I didn't realize how much my hip flexors were pulling my knee out of position on squats, which is why my knees were swelling. And then ever since I've been stretching that, I haven't had any problems. So problem was solved right there. That just by one stretch solved 2 years of knee mystery, which was really stupid of me. But, just like me, I'm not perfect. Just like anyone else, I'm not perfect, and I need reminders, just like you guys, to do these exact same things because it's really easy to get distracted, even if you are in fitness. And weak glutes, rotator cuff, midline, these are pain generators. Okay, so it's back pain is very common to have when you have weak glutes. Having a weak infraspinatus or supraspinatus or subscap, whatever, can lead to rotator cuff pain or poor mobility. Also, like the pec minor could lead to rotator cuff pain. So you want to make sure that is stretched and released, especially when you're doing overhead movements. And then your midline as well, because that can protect your spine. And you want to make sure that all those things are strong. And you need to use assessments, not guesses. So you need to know which one's strong, which one isn't, and relative to what. Okay, because you can think it's strong. I mean, I've know many people who are like, tell me all the time, like, oh, well, I'm pretty good at this. I'm like, no, you're not. I'm sorry. I know you're doing your best, but sometimes your best is pretty bad. And I'm including myself in that. I'm not just talking down anyone, but it's so true is that, I thought I was good at, I thought my hip mobility was fine, really was not. Turns out that my glutes were fine in terms of mobility, but my actual hip flexors were not. And so sometimes you just need someone to remind you of where to go. And then movement prep is better than random stretching. So make sure you're prepping for the movements that you're doing for that day and increasing your range of motion, which will definitely help with joint pain later on down the road. Let's go into number 6, which is thou shalt train for performance, not punishment. So your workout should build you up, not break you down. So you should feel better after your workout. You shouldn't be totally wrecked. Now, if you're training for like an event or like a little CrossFit competition, yes, you kind of have to beat your down a little bit. But for 99% of you listening to this, at the end of the day, we're just training for longevity. So your workout should leave you fresh enough to where you can come back the next day and do it again. So punishing your body just leads to burnout and also resentment, and you're not going to stay with it. So you have to choose activity and choose an intensity that is like, okay, I felt that it was difficult, but I could do it again tomorrow. That's exactly the mentality you should have and the feeling you should have coming back into this. And you want to focus on chasing skill, speed, and strength, not fatigue. Okay, so like sloppy, because as soon as you accumulate fatigue, reps get sloppy. Then you're just accumulating too much volume in a specific muscle group. It's hard to recover, and then you just get sore. And then when the muscles tighten up, then we're going back to the joint problem and mobility problem. So choose a volume, or have someone help you choose a volume that is going to help you not do fatigue-based reps. And then good training leaves you energized, not wrecked, kind of like what we started with. And it's pretty self-explanatory there, but again, if you're not able to physically train about 5 times a week with about 2 recovery days and 1 day off, then you're probably going a little too hard either on volume, intensity, or frequency, and then only really a coach can help you figure out what is best for you and what is the most sustainable. Because a lot of times we think we can do a lot more in a day than we really can, and we actually, for the most part, I actually find that we need to edit people, that we need to hold them back just a little bit, because everyone's like, they get really excited and then they're like, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I think I can fit this in. And then you're like, dude, you got to back off a little bit. Let's bring it in. We can only do so much in one day. And also we need you to come back for tomorrow for the next day. It's very common to see people bite off more than they can chew. And I've made that same mistake as well, where I'm like, I'm going to do handstand push-ups, I'm going to do this lift, I'm going to do this aerobic work, and I got these intensity intervals, and then you're like, wow, I can only do so much in 24 hours, and also recover from that as well. So number 7 is thou shalt master consistency over intensity. So 1 all-out workout doesn't beat 5 solid ones. So we've already kind of talked about this, but we've seen this many times where people just go super heavy, super intense, and then they can't come in for another 3 days. So you want to make sure that we're getting in 5 workouts a week and being sustainable with there. And you want to create default days where energy is low, you still show up. So our priority days are going to be Monday, Tuesday, depending on your work schedule. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's okay to back off a little bit, do something on the weekend, and then take 1 weekend day off. That's usually the best template for majority, 80-20 rule, 80% of people. That usually works. You want to develop routines as well. So you want to make sure that we're having structure. Now, if you come to Red Wolf, then we already do this, so it's already preset for you. But if you're training on your own, then you need to develop routines. So it's like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're doing strength work or a push-pull combo on those days, whatever, legs, whatever, doesn't matter. And then Tuesday, Thursday is aerobic, hit intervals, zone 2, sit intervals, whatever. And then Saturday is like you're doing mobility or another zone 2 or another strength thing, and then Sunday off. That's a good kind of general template right there that works very well for people. And then remember that fitness is a long game, so you want to stack the boring bricks over and over again. I'm going to tell you right now that it's boring, it's not super sexy, it's not fun, and you're gonna get over it, which is why it's really important to choose something that's sustainable, that you actually enjoy, that you look forward to, and also add in variety, man. Like have some variety, like go play beach volleyball, go for a beach run, go for a walk, play with your kids, just carry your kids around, just be as active as possible on other days, so that way you're still getting activity in, but you're not just being a purist towards one specific thing, because over a long enough timeline, you're going to get kind of bored with it, and you want to make sure that there's some novelty in there as well, because the brain will react very well to that. And number 8, thou shalt manage stress like it's part of the program. So our main talking points here, we're going to talk about stress first. So inflammation, stress upon stress. So remember that when you train, that stress is that when you do work out hard, that stress is a response to the training. And also, if you're already stressed out outside of the gym, you're going to pile on stress on stress. So it's really important that we manage cortisol, inflammation, poor sleep, and low recovery. So if you're not doing any of those things, then the lower the intensity should be in your training. And then we can always ramp it back up later. So it's really important to adjust, right? It's just like a dial. We're just going up and down, and then you're not a worse person because you're not going super intense in your workouts if your stress is very high outside of the gym, because once you pile that on, you're not going to be able to recover as well, and you're not going to be able to train as frequently. So You want to be sustainable and zoom out a little bit and remember that the end goal is to keep doing it, not just to do it just intensely. And we also want to track stressors, right? So we want to see how's work going? How's family going? Are you overtraining? Are you under recovering? These are really important because that helps us identify what the constraint is in the person itself. And then we can help you formulate a plan moving forward to where it's actually you're actually able to keep coming into the gym. Because once you stop, it's so hard to get started again. And then bad things start to happen. You start getting overweight, all that stuff in between. And we want tactical tools. So we want walking, breath work, screen curfews. So turn off your screens by like 8 or 9 p.m. On hobbies as well, just to keep things fresh. And then mental hygiene is just important as physical hygiene. We want to make sure that our response to the training is going well, and that we're not also burning out our central nervous system from doing too much max intensity or trying to max out every time. So mentally just being like, I'm looking forward to working out again. And number 9, thou shalt get blood work annually. Now, this is something I don't do, which I should. I don't do this as frequently as I should, but I plan on doing it. And we want to test, not guess. Okay, it's really always important to use data to make decisions, use evidence, stop basing things on feel. Be like, well, I feel like I'm eating healthy. Well, what do you have to back that up? It's like, oh, nothing. I don't track my food. Well, then we don't know then. You don't know. We don't know. It's kind of like saying, like, I think I'm doing a good job at your job. And they're like, well, what metrics are you hitting? You're like, I don't know. Well, then are you doing a good job? So it's the same thing. We have to apply the same principles that we have in every other part of our life. And data and evidence is always the best thing to look at because it is objective. It's not emotional. When we start making big decisions based on emotions, that's where things start to tailspin a little bit. So you have to look at your testosterone, thyroid, CRP, vitamin D, iron, cortisol, all that stuff, and use all this data to optimize, not just diagnose. So once you know where all this is, it's like now we can kind of adjust your training. And it does work because you can see what's going on underneath the hood, essentially. And good doctors and regular labs is like a long-term insurance policy, and it's worth the money. And it's if you do it once a year, it's good to just get a good check-in. And a lot of times insurance will cover it, or your doctor will probably give an order to get that taken care of. And then finally, number 10, last one. So thou shalt surround yourself with people who train hard and live well. So this is probably the most important one because your environment matters more than you think it does. I know you think it doesn't, but it does. And your environment is either pulling you down or it's pulling you up. And training partners, a coach, accountability, inspiration, like all these things come into that when it comes to having a solid group of people who are going to help you go from point A to point B and then point C to point D. And if you're not surrounded by those people, then we all know what happens. And goes without saying, I think we've all heard the term that you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. And if you want to be a better person, hang out with better people and leave the used to be fit crowd behind. Now, this is probably the worst thing that I do, and it's actually probably annoys the crap out of my wife. But I always talk a lot of times when I don't do well in something, or it's like I'm just not feeling it, or I can't do an exercise as well as I used to back in my mid to late 20s. I always tell Caitlin, my wife, and I'm always like, man, I used to be able to do 17 muscle ups unbroken, and now I can't even do 7. And then she's like, well, you're not 23 anymore, and you have kids. You didn't also work as hard in the gym. You also you have a lot more responsibilities. And you also are coaching a lot more than you did because you actually have people who want to work out with you back then versus when I was in my early 20s when I didn't have as many clients because they didn't want to train with me because I was so busy training for the rep races. So we got to leave that behind. I'll leave it there. I don't want to get into that too much because I don't want to open up that wound. But build or join a culture where fitness is the norm, not a phase. Now, with so many people who have interviewed on the podcast, this podcast itself has told, every single one of them always brings up the community. And they always bring up how many friends they've made. They always bring up the support. They always bring up the coaching. They always bring up the programming. And it's because when you have a culture like that and it's dialed in and it holds you accountable and it gives you a game plan and all you have to do is show up for the hour and then you're good for the day, that outsources everything else, and it makes it so much easier to actually get the work done at the appropriate, it helps you do it the right things the right way at the right time for the right amount of time, all within a 1 hour time frame. And then you get in, you get out. Because I can't tell you how many years I spent spinning my wheels just simply because I was doing things the wrong way. And then finally I had someone teach me the right way, and I wasted a year on something that could have been solved in 30 seconds. And that's the biggest thing that holds people back, is they think that a lot of times people actually know what to do, but actually executing on that is a whole nother story. Like, getting fit is very simple. You eat vegetables, you eat lean protein, you avoid processed foods, you drink water, and then you exercise 5 times a week, and you weight train with progressive overload. You add in aerobic work every once in a while, do something intense, lift heavy enough to where it's tough, and then recover afterwards properly. It's that easy. But I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's easy. That's actually the opposite. It's very simple, but it's not easy. And so actually staying with that over the long term to see results is going to require a culture that's going to bring you all together, and make sure that you actually stay motivated to keep doing it. Because that's another one of the biggest things, is people always tell me that, oh, I'm just not motivated. Well, you have to be in a position to where you're tired of where you're currently at. And also, another way to add motivation is simply to be around people who, this is completely normal, and this is our lifestyle. This is what we do now. So that really helps me. I hope that helps you. So quick recap, everybody. Let's go over the main points again. So number 1, thou shalt not train like you're 22. Thou shalt prioritize recovery as much as training. Thou shalt lift heavy and often. Thou shalt fuel, not starve. Thou shalt stretch what's tight and strengthen what is weak. Thou shalt train for performance, not punishment. Thou shalt master consistency over intensity. Thou shalt manage stress like it's part of the program. Thou shalt get blood work annually, and thou shalt surround thyself with people who train hard and live well. So just a reminder that if you're doing any of these things wrong, don't worry about it. I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm just here to give you some tips that I wish I had a little bit earlier on. And a lot of these solo podcasts that I do are reminders to myself. And you're not broken. You just need better rules. And I'm including myself in that. And in terms of an action step that you can take today, just pick 1 or 2 of these and then move forward with it. Choose one that's actually easy to get done, because when you're moving into this and you're trying something new, you have to choose something with the lowest barrier to entry, and then fix it very slowly. And then share this with a friend who's grinding it out right now, but they're spinning their wheels. Do me a favor and share that with them. It might just help them. And thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you guys next time.